The rise of and deep reliance on cloud capability has forever changed business and also the responsibilities of CIO, leading to altered organizational structures, increased demands, and challenging key success metrics. The CIO is expected to provide IT teams and company employees a cloud-enabled workspace that provides contextual security, extreme productivity, and consumerized user experience. During our webinar today, our speakers will share the latest research and technology strategies focused on Cloud Transformation 2.0. This will include a focus on user and IT productivity and experience needs, unified security across devices, apps, and content anywhere, anytime, and of course, hybrid multi-cloud environment visibility, control, and management. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, What CIOs Need to Know About Cloud Transformation 2.0. This is brought to you by Citrix. My name is Aaron Goldberg. I'm a contributing editor with IDG, and I'll be your moderator for this event. Today, we're very fortunate to have two expert speakers joining me, Julie Ekstrom, SVP of IDG, and Steve Wilson, Vice President, Products for Cloud and IoT of Citrix. If you want to learn more detail about them, you can find their full bios under the Bios widget on your console. But before we start, just a couple of things about our event to help you get more value from it. First, you can download a copy of today's presentation. That's in your resources area. I actually believe it's a best practice to download this presentation. Why? Three important reasons. First, it's a great place to take notes as we go along. Second, it's a persistent reminder of this event, and you can use it in the weeks and months to come. And third, and maybe most importantly, it's something you can share with your peers in your organization so they get value as well. And while you're in that resources area, there's some other great informational assets you can look at as well. We're also having a live Q&A. You can ask your question at any time. You can even make an observation and just send it to us using your Ask a Question feature on the console. We'll get to these questions, comments, or observations during our live Q&A at the end of the event. Very importantly, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Citrix, for making today's event possible. Without their support, we don't get a chance to bring you this great information. So without further ado, let's get the event started, and I'm going to turn it over to Julie to get us going. Julie, over to you.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. What I'm going to be sharing with you are early insights from IDG's cloud study. This is the 7th year we've been conducting this study, and in fact, these insights are so early that the folks that are joining us to hear them today will be the first hearing them. We haven't yet released this to the public. The purpose of this study is to look at cloud computing trends in usage. We'll take a look at business drivers fueling investment, and we'll also talk a little bit about the barriers to cloud deployment inside of organizations. And I always think it's important to understand who's represented in our research. We had 550 respondents. All of the survey respondents had to be involved in the purchase process for cloud computing. And as a result of that, what's represented here is feedback from your peers. So these are IT decision makers, your peers that are making cloud computing decisions inside of organizations. 75% of the respondents were VP level and above. IDG tends to skew heavily toward enterprise level organizations. And you can see that represented in the average company size of just over 12,000 employees. And we did hit a wide variety of industries. You can see those represented in the bottom right-hand side of the slide there. So we're going to dive right in here. And let's take a look at the top business goals driving cloud investments. Improving speed of IT service delivery followed by greater flexibility to react are number 1 and 2, which really underscores that cloud is being leveraged as a primary solution for speed and flexibility inside of organizations. You'll notice that enabling business continuity is number 3 on the list, but that tends to be more important for SMB organizations. As we talk to our enterprise-level organizations, a lot of the feedback that we get from them is that business continuity is already baked into their strategy and the solutions they've deployed, which is why it's skewing a little bit more heavily for SMBs here. Let's take a deeper look at usage. Today, 89% of respondents are using SaaS-based models. And infrastructure as a service is the second largest at 73%. We asked them to project out. Tell us what you think this is going to look like in 18 months. And they're expecting growth. SaaS is expected to grow to 95%, and infrastructure as a service is going to jump 10 points to 83%. Off to the right-hand side, what we've got here is a look at the composition of their current IT environment. We asked them to break it down for us. 52% is non-cloud-based. Last year, that was at 55%, so it's come down slightly since our last study, although not dramatically. 23% resides on SaaS-based models, and 16% is residing on infrastructure as a service model. Here again, we asked them to look 18 months out to give us some sense of what they thought that composition might look like in 18 months. And you can see non-cloud is shrinking. It's gone from 52% to they're projecting 31% in 18 months. SaaS is increasing, and it represents about a third of their organization they're projecting in about 18 months. Infrastructure as a service is sitting at about 22% in 18 months. So they're expecting some big shifts in the next 18 months with regard to the overall composition of their IT infrastructure. Overall, cloud environments are maturing, but it's becoming increasingly more complicated. We've added multi-cloud to the study this year, and 42% of organizations are utilizing multi-cloud structures. The biggest reason they're doing so is because it's providing increased cloud options for them. Other benefits include spreading the risk from a disaster recovery perspective and also spreading workloads to increase flexibility. You can also see that avoiding vendor lock-in is captured in the top of the list of benefits. This is a huge area of concern for them. They don't want vendor lock-in. And what we took a look at here were the challenges or barriers to implementing a cloud strategy. We actually broke it down by model. You can see that vendor lock-in is the number one challenge for them to implementing a cloud strategy across all deployment models. An interesting point of comparison when we look at the results of this year compared to last year's study, vendor lock-in has risen as a concern for them. It went from 44% last year to 47% this year. Also on the list of concerns are concerns related to where the data is being stored, and security remains a concern. Although security declined from last year, it was sitting at about 54% last year, and it's come down to 34% in total. That implies that vendors are doing a better job addressing security concerns, which is good news. As your cloud environments become more complex, concerns about having the right skill sets are rising to the top. And you can see where this is really prevalent is with regard to platform as a service and infrastructure as a service. It's about midway down the list, labeled 3 and 4 respectively. Focusing on skill sets is an incredibly important factor in ensuring that we're delivering maximum value on our cloud investments. Cloud deployments are definitely having an impact on the IT function within the organization. We just talked about one of them related to skill sets and talent, and you can see that listed about midway down this list here. They're seeking new IT talent and new skills. We asked them, though, what are some of the things that are impacting the IT function inside your organization? Number one on the list was increased collaboration with other business units inside of the organization. I think we would all contend that this is probably a pretty good thing for most organizations. Number 2 on the list is rethinking the IT organization structure. So they're making decisions about whether or not they need to change their current structure. And then number 3 on the list is retraining and repositioning their current IT staff, followed by seeking those new talent and new skills. Overall, cloud is impacting the IT function on average in 3 different ways. And it's even more significant when we look at it within enterprise-level organizations. That average jumps to 3.3. So a few key takeaways. IT organizations, we know, are moving incredibly quickly. They're really focused on innovation. They're forced to adapt quickly to change and new market conditions. And investing in cloud is really a way for them to help address this need for speed as well as flexibility. We talked about some of the primary concerns here. Number 1 on the list being vendor lock-in, followed by where data is stored, and just overall security practices of the cloud computing solutions. These are concerns that you should be leaning into your vendors to help address for you. And as cloud models have matured, organizations must make sure they're examining the skill sets inside of their organization, because it is all about finding ways to maximize value from our cloud investments. So with that, I will pass it over to Steve.
Hey, thanks, Julie. So I'd like to add some additional insights to the discussion around some of the practical learnings that we've gained here at Citrix in working with a lot of customers on their own cloud transformation journeys. And really what we see that's key is there's so much change that's gone on in the last few years in terms of how people are approaching their overall transformation to cloud. And the technology is changing, the landscape is changing. I think that Julie's data that we saw really indicates a lot of those changes and what's coming there. But I think in order to look at how we go forward, we might want to start by looking back a little bit. And so I'd like to look back in history just a bit here and look at what our enterprises used to look like. It's a fairly simple picture where we have our traditional IT resources, different kinds of packaged applications, some custom applications, and they're running on our own servers, storage, and networks behind our firewall. And if you had users outside the firewall, they access these through resources like VPN. So it was relatively simple to secure. You wrapped everything that was important inside your firewall, and you had some rather draconian security measures that might be hard to get through for your users, but it was pretty simple. The trick here is as we started to see different ways of approaching our IT functions, things started to change. And if we really look at this, along came the vendors who were promoting cloud in terms of infrastructure as a service. And they said, hey, I got an idea for you. Let's transform to cloud. And what we're going to do is get rid of your physical on-prem resources like your servers and storage, and we're going to move your applications to the cloud. A lot of times we called this the lift and shift model. And it sounded appealing, right? We could get variable costs. Maybe this could help us improve agility. But the fact is, for anybody who tried this, they pretty quickly found it didn't work. And Cloud Transformation 1.0 really wasn't successful. And there were a lot of reasons for this. And these are somewhat similar to some of the data that we saw in the IDG study earlier. But key reasons that we've seen in our practical experience here, certainly governance and security has been a major concern with moving resources outside of your firewall and into a public cloud. Data gravity in general is a huge issue. You have so much data, you can't move that all to the cloud, or at least not all at once. Vendor lock-in. And then the last one, and this maybe is the most important one, which is you can't do this all at once. For a modern enterprise, your infrastructure is so large, there's no way to consider a single atomic move to the cloud. It's something that's going to happen gradually. And so if we really look at how practical cloud transformations are happening in today's enterprise, it'll give us some insights into how we need to approach this. So if we go back and look at our Cloud 1.0 model, this is our Enterprise 1.0 model. We see we have our same on-prem servers and storage. We have our firewall and our VPN server. The way a lot of companies started their cloud journey was maybe a set of developers started renting VMs from an infrastructure as a service cloud on their corporate credit cards. in a lot of ways, people got led down a path that says this might be how your cloud transformation happens. And that, in a lot of ways, is how we got fixated on this lift and shift model. But a potentially bigger shift for companies was maybe one of your lines of business decided to adopt Salesforce.com and move to cloud-based CRM system. This opened up a whole new different world of possibilities around SaaS applications and changed the way that people looked at how they could adopt new applications. And then finally, one of the most common cloud elements that we're seeing in practice these days is the adoption of Office 365. Moving to a cloud-based productivity model, whether it be with Microsoft or Google, is changing the way that companies are looking at their overall infrastructure. Now, once you've done 2 or 3 of these things, and largely large enterprises are doing all 3 of these, what quickly happens is the door opens to a wide range of infrastructure and SaaS providers. And you now wind up with a situation where you've started a cloud transformation. You're getting large portions of your applications delivered from the cloud, whether that be in an infrastructure type environment or a SaaS environment, but you also still have nearly everything that you had to start with. All of that infrastructure inside your data center is still there. And this leads us to the truth about how these transformations happen. The truth of it is that your cloud transformation will have 2 characteristics. It will be hybrid, meaning that you have on-prem resources in addition to cloud-based resources. And the other thing is it will be multi-cloud. You will have probably multiple infrastructure providers and almost certainly multiple SaaS providers. We saw earlier that a big concern for enterprises around cloud transformation is vendor lock-in. And the fact that you're going to have a hybrid and a multi-cloud transformation is partly driven by that, but it's also your security against that lock-in, is that you need to develop your strategy in such a way to enable this and to make this environment productive. So if we look at this, let's look at the challenges that come from this kind of real-world cloud transformation. Well, you will be hybrid and you will be multi-cloud. There's challenges for 2 types of people involved here. One of them are your end users. They have their stuff now spread out all over the place. It's no longer just in their start menu. It's spread between their start menu. It's in their bookmarks menu. It's all over the place. They may have different identities. It may be hard to get at all these things. There may be performance issues. On the other hand, for your IT department, there's an additional set of challenges as well. You now have multiple cloud infrastructure APIs that you have to deal with because no 2 major clouds are using the same APIs. The next is really around how do I secure this? My Enterprise 1.0 model was that I put a firewall around everything. I can't put a firewall around the internet. So really it comes down to how do I secure, how do I audit, govern all of this, and then how do I ensure it performs? So to that end, what we wind up with is something of a tug of war between the experience and the productivity features that end users want and the control and security that IT wants. The problem is, as long as this is a tug of war, in general, the IT department tends to lose these. There are too many ways for employees to go out and get their own highly productive tools. They just may not give the security and control that your enterprise needs. You're going to set up a shadow IT organization. You need to put this into a context where you can get both the experience and productivity and the security and control. And so this is going to impact your choice of tools and your choice of strategy around cloud transformation is to set up this partnership. So if we look at this, the first thing you need to acknowledge is that you're probably going to have multiple types of infrastructure as a service. If you're going to be virtualizing, say, Windows desktop workloads, you're going to have to come to the conclusion that you're going to have to manage multiple cloud APIs. You're going to want to encapsulate these vendors in a way that gives you control without having to have copies of every script for how you do everything for each of the different clouds. You're going to want to do things like auto-scaling with the ability to tune your infrastructure up and down based on demands. With a lot of these applications, they're very heavily dependent on time of day or time of month or time of year. They're not consistent workloads. But if you run them 24/7 like you used to in your on-prem infrastructure, it's going to cost you a fortune. So your tools need to take these items into account. The next thing that you need to do is you need to look at the security model. As we said earlier, it's not as simple as wrapping a firewall around everything. You now need to handle multiple application types, and you're going to need to move to a model that's more risk-based. Things like analytics-driven access can be key here. You can move to the kind of assumption that basically everything is outside your firewall, and that allows you to fundamentally rethink things like network security. And this really leads to a concept that we call building a secure digital perimeter. The idea is that this isn't a simple single set of networking technologies. This is a comprehensive approach to rethinking the security around your enterprise and how you do that in a more modern approach. So a key part of this is user behavior analytics. One of the things that you see is as you stop depending on the firewall to secure all of your elements, you need to move to a stance where you're continuously evaluating who's accessing resources, what do they have access to, and are they using them correctly? So user behavior analytics can take inputs from a wide variety of data feeds that includes how people are using their applications, their files, what are they accessing over the network, what types of applications are they using, either cloud-based, mobile, desktop. We feed these into an analytics engine that helps categorize these things and helps understand the basics of what these all mean, and then we can actually put them through machine learning algorithms that can turn these into risk indicators. And then we can take those risk indicators and turn those into action. And we've developed a set of technologies to help our customers with this. And we see this as really being very key to the next generation of network security, is that it isn't just about securing your packets. It's around coming up, taking a higher level look at who your users are, what are they doing, what's normal and what's not normal, and how can you make more dynamic, more fine-grained decisions around who has access to what at what time and from what location. So with this secure digital perimeter comes the idea that you need to also enable world-class productivity and ease of use, even in the face of all of these new security technologies. And we call this the idea of building your secure digital workspace. You need to provide unified identity and access across all of your application types. You need to provide consistent user experience, even for applications that might be built in different decades. Your users shouldn't have to worry about where do they access them from and how do they use them. You need to unify your access to your data and documents. You're going to have documents that are stored on old file shares as well as on the newest file sharing platforms. How do I unify that and make that easy for my users? And ultimately, how do I give my users the idea of instant access? It's not just about having one username and one password. It's about making this transparent. It's about giving you instant access to the resources that you need. So if we look at the capabilities that you need to build this kind of secure digital workspace, these give you some idea of what you need. Over on the left, you'll see a set of technologies that are geared at the end user. Things like how do I provide contextual access and contextual performance to my application? How do I provide a unified experience where it's easy to find all of my applications? And again, how do I get things like instant access beyond simple single sign-on? Over on the right, you see the technologies that the IT department needs to feel good about providing this kind of instant access experience. How do I manage my endpoints, even as these become much more dynamic and include new classes of devices, even things like new IoT devices, things built on platforms like Raspberry Pi or Alexa for Business. And then how do I control my content? How do I control my documents, no matter where they're stored, no matter what file sharing platform I'm using or what legacy file shares that I'm storing them on? And then ultimately, you need to wrap this in security and performance analytics to ensure that I have that secure digital perimeter. So summing this up, your architecture will be hybrid and it will be multi-cloud. Every customer that we work with today sees the same thing. There's no such thing as a simple, atomic, one-step transformation to the cloud. This means that your users will need to access all these different app types from multiple different sources across multiple different clouds, including the cloud behind your own firewall, your own private cloud. That means your perimeter security has to evolve. It needs to be more flexible, and it needs to incorporate things like user behavior analytics. Finally, the idea is that you need to deliver a unified, secure digital workspace that provides that great experience for your end users, but also gives your IT department what they need to feel confident about rolling out these new technologies. So really the idea here is to take your workers, allow them to use the applications they need on whatever device they're on, whatever cloud that those are hosted on, whatever network they're attached to get secure, instant access to those applications to do what they need. So with that, I'm going to wrap up here, and I'm going to turn it back over to the moderator for Q&A.
All right, let's get to those questions, Steve. There are a number of good ones here. One I'd like to start with, I think, really kind of outlines everything. Is one of the most important initiatives for organizations is to deploy this secure digital workspace. And this one's from Scott. What are some of the most important elements of it that he should be looking at?
Oh, so it's a great question, right? I think there's pieces that you want to look at from the IT and infrastructure perspective, and things you want to look at from the people angle, right? From an infrastructure perspective, you need to pick a solution that's going to fit this multi-cloud, hybrid cloud model that we talked about. When you come to the point that you acknowledge that you're going to have multiple cloud providers, including your own cloud, you need to pick a solution that's going to fit well with that model. Now, on the other hand, from the end user perspective, you really need to look at unifying all of the key things that somebody needs to do their job, to do their work, really, because this workspace is going to become the pivot point for them. And so you need to make sure that you can provide them access to all of the applications, whether those are maybe Windows-based applications, SaaS-based, web-based applications, whether they're true public cloud SaaS applications or internet apps, as well as integrating with increasingly the number of mobile applications that people are running natively on their phones or their tablets. And then the last piece to not forget here is making sure that your secure digital workspace integrates with your document storage platforms, because so many of the workflows that users do every day pivot around documents more than they do applications. If you think about it, do I come in the morning and say, I'm going to use Excel, or do I come in the morning and say, I need to do my budget? And if I'm doing my budget, I'm opening my budget spreadsheet. And so making sure that those files, no matter where they're stored, in the cloud, on your prem, in your SharePoint server, on your NFS server, making sure that you have all that integrated so that it's easy to get at no matter where you're storing it is really, really key.
All right. And speaking of changes, a question here from Carol about how are IT organizations changing their processes to support Cloud 2.0?
So this is a great question, right? And when you think about Cloud 2.0, or really Cloud Transformation 2.0, it's about coming to acknowledge that you're going to have a true hybrid environment and that you're going to get a lot of your services from SaaS as well as the existing services that you have on your prem. And so one of the key things is from a security perspective that you have to evolve your outlook on security from, relatively simple network-based security where you can say I'm inside the firewall or outside the firewall and everything is based around a password, to looking at processes that continually evaluate the security of your environment and continuously evaluate the activities of your users. And so moving to a model where you are able to get more continuous data on what your users are doing, what resources they're accessing, what platforms or devices they're accessing those from, can allow you to build up a much more comprehensive model about how you do defense in depth for your data. This secure digital workspace is all about making it easy for people to get access to everything. The flip side of that is you need a new dynamic set of security practices and policies that allow you to still enforce security and best practices around all of your data and your applications, but while making it easy for your end users to get access to them. And that's the true challenge in terms of how people are having to evolve those policies and practices.
All right. I've got a question from Anil, and he's looking to understand better, where did Cloud 1.0 come up short? What are some of the key limitations there?
Sure. I think that ultimately people looked at this early on. I think it started from the perspective of, a developer in your organization starts renting VMs and they get pretty excited because of this instant agility that it seems to provide to them for a set of use cases. They moved from it taking 6 months to, procure hardware, get it racked and stacked, to taking 6 minutes to create a new set of hardware. So that's pretty exciting. But ultimately, when you look at it for true, production workloads and migrating workloads from on-prem to the cloud, the first thing that you have to acknowledge is that the people who were successful in that sort of Cloud 1.0 model were people doing completely new build-outs, right? The early customers on, say, AWS were people like Netflix, where they were just building something that didn't exist before. Migrating existing on-prem infrastructure and applications is a whole different ballgame. And that's really where Cloud 1.0 fell down, is it didn't think about coexistence. It didn't think about multi-cloud. It didn't think about hybrid. And it also really didn't have a mature perspective on how was I going to deal with the cold hard facts of things like data sovereignty, and how is I going to get guarantees about where my data is stored and how it's being accessed. It's fine for a bunch of Netflix movies that I'm streaming. It's different for your core enterprise assets. And I think those are some of the key places that Cloud 1.0 came up short, and that where this newer dynamic model for Cloud 2.0 is being much more effective at addressing it.
Speaking of kind of the migration and momentum, a question here, this one's from James, about, even though cloud adoption seemed to go pretty fast, it even seems to be gaining more momentum today. Why do you think that is?
I think if I put it in kind of Malcolm Gladwell terms, right, this is a classic tipping point where early on people could see the benefits of doing cloud computing, but there's being the first early adopter in on something like that when you're dealing with true mission critical assets, that's tough, right? You have to have a serious business case justifying that, and you need to be really good at selling your organization on it, and, probably all the way up to your board of directors. So it's a very aggressive move to make early on. It could be a huge competitive advantage, but it's a hard sell. We've moved on from there, where I think now enough large corporations, even governments, have started to make moves to the cloud to where people feel comfortable with that as more of a default stance, that they understand that there are going to be resources in the cloud. And when you look at some of these big tipping factors, like more and more people moving, ERP and CRM systems to the cloud, and then more and more people moving their basic office productivity to the cloud with Office 365 or G Suite, the IT departments come to acknowledge that public cloud and hybrid cloud is mandatory at some level. Once you get over that hump, there's a tipping point and things start to follow. So it doesn't mean that all of your systems will quickly move to the cloud, but it means that actually we're going to rapidly approach 100% of the organizations using some public cloud in their overall strategy. And that's why we see this accelerating.
All right. Well, Steve, unfortunately, it looks like we've come to the end of our allotted time for this webcast. I want to thank our speakers today, Steve and Julie. Just a great job today. Provided a lot of very critical information, and I personally believe that the digital workspace is such an important initiative for any IT organization because we have to go beyond what the legacy gives us. I'd also like to thank our sponsor today, Citrix, because without them we don't get a chance to bring you this great information that's right up to date. And most importantly, for you and our audience, thank you for joining us today. We truly appreciate the fact that you make us part of your busy day. For IDG, this is Aaron Goldberg, signing off.